Oh, good. Wonderful. You want to hear a funny joke? so, I so when I first went to university, I studied mathematics, and so you get all these jokes about engineers, right? Because it was always this battle between the mathies and the engineers, and so and you look quite solid. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'll take it as a good thing. So there's this joke. I hope I can remember it on the fly here. I have a better joke that's funnier that I can remember all the time, but so there are these four engineers driving in a car, and there's a chemical engineer, a mechanical engineer, an electrical engineer, and a computer engineer. And they're driving along, and all of a sudden the car stops, out of nowhere. And they all are sitting there going, and the chemical engineer is going, it's got to be the gas, right? I mean, there's got to be something wrong with the gas. The electrical engineer is going, no, I think it's the spark plugs. I think something's wrong with the alternator. And the mechanical engineer says, no, no, it's the piston. Something's wrong. We got to shave the cylinders and blah, blah, blah. And they're all staring at the computer engineer, waiting for his input. And he says, well, maybe if we all just got out of the car and got back in, maybe then it would work. That's my, I'm an engineer, be careful. Oh, well then I won't sing the song we used to sing, we are, we are, we are, we are. Okay, you want to hear a funnier joke? Which is not why we're here, but I have to tell you my favorite joke when I just meet strangers on the street. Okay, one more joke, and then we're gonna get serious. This is my favorite joke. It's really the only joke I remember besides the engineer joke. So these two guys are walking their dogs. It's a sunny day, it's beautiful, right? One guy's got a great big Doberman and the other one's got a Chihuahua. And they're walking along, and the guy with the Doberman says, man, I'd love a beer right now, wouldn't you? And the guy says, yeah, that'd be awesome. So they walk up to the bar, and like this bar, and the guy with the Chihuahua says, they're not going to let us in. And he goes, watch this. Puts on sunglasses, walks up to the bouncer, and the bouncer says, hey man, you can't bring a dog in here. And the guy says, well, I'm blind. It's my seeing eye dog. And he says, they're using Dobermans for that? He's like, yeah. And he goes, oh, okay, go on in. So the next guy's like, huh, all right. So he puts his sunglasses on, walks up to the bouncer. The bouncer says, hey man, you can't come in here with a dog. And he goes, well, it's my seeing eye dog. And the bouncer says, they're using Chihuahuas for that? And he goes, they gave me a Chihuahua? It's not funny, but I think it's hilarious. Ah, oh, so good. Who knew that Friday was joke day? You know. Ah. Okay, ready? So we study the masculine and feminine for different reasons. We imagine it certainly in relationships, and the masculine and feminine, what I mean by this is not is not gendered. It's not we have a lot of weird ideas about masculine and feminine, and honestly I wish I had better words. I wish I could use yin and yang. I wish I could use different words that really define this polarity, but I can't. I haven't been able to find them. Even yin and yang is nice, but it doesn't have the dynamic dance that masculine and feminine do for some reason. So it has nothing to do with gender, has nothing to do with orientation, has nothing to do with anything, especially what we're talking about today, because it's how the masculine and feminine lives within us and dances within us. And what's really valuable about this is, first of all, it brings us great peace. It brings us great happiness when we feel that not only the balance of the masculine and feminine within us that brings us that, right, this deep peace. There's the same dance between the masculine and feminine within us that we can have with other people. And when we have it within us, we feel alive. We feel potent. We feel like we matter and we're supposed to be here. It's the same thing as if we have a relationship that's stagnant. It's kind of, maybe it's disconnected, maybe it's just not connecting, right? We can feel like that inside. We can feel stagnant inside because our masculine and feminine are not connecting. And so the two aspects of this is, one, we feel alive, we feel virile, we feel potent and excited and fun. And also when we have this balance within us and we find the balance, we find the dynamic that really works and brings us joy, we can't help it but bring it to all the relationships in our life. Every single relationship will soon follow the exact same pattern. And this is really good news because it means that we can do something. It isn't about other people changing. It isn't about anything like that. It really is about us shifting inside and finding that aliveness ourselves. And then we kind of just invite other people to the party. And I mean, this can be a new person in your life, a person that's been in your life for decades. But when we change, and I think it changes the relationship in a number of ways. In one way, our resonance changes. Like, and that sounds, I don't know, whatever. But it changes, and then all of a sudden, everyone around us goes, I feel calmer. I feel happier. I feel more optimistic. I feel safe. I feel whatever, right? But not only that, when you have a strong masculine and feminine dynamic within you, in beautiful balance and harmony and dance and joy and love, you actually also expect that from the world around you. You expect it from relationships. If you have a very harsh judge within, which isn't a healthy masculine, but if you have a strong judge within, you'll be fine with it out in the world. You'll be fine with bosses that berate you. You'll be fine with family that tells you what you should or shouldn't be doing. Partners that like to tell you what you're doing wrong. And you'll just put up with it. And as soon as it shifts within, as soon as we do the inner work to actually hear those voices and understand it and really look at it, if someone else does it, we either look at them and go, hey, that's out of line. Or we just no longer hang out with them, right? They either shift or they don't. And it's no big deal. Like it just becomes life. It doesn't become an issue. It doesn't become an argument. It doesn't become anything. It's just what is. We now live in this reality, in this beautiful balance of what connection is, about what joy is, about why I'm here. And we'll only naturally be with others who want to experience a similar thing. So what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to try to focus on just how it works within, but it's naturally going to blend out into our relationships a lot. So the first thing I want to talk about is what masculine and feminine mean. Because one of the challenges with, the past millennia or so, that we've really been living within a patriarchy. And I don't mean this even just gendered. It's not just man over woman or something. I mean masculine over feminine. And because of this, and because it's not just that this masculine over feminine situation is happening, but it's happened in disconnection. The feminine has been oppressed in every way, not just gendered, but in every way. So that could be um, the preference of logic over intuition. It could be the preference of structure over chaos. It could be the fact that only the one giving is the one that matters. The one that receiving is obviously, worthless and unable to give or something. Only the giving is valued. It could be the protector and the vulnerable. You never want to be vulnerable, right? This is a sign of weakness. Every single one of the feminine aspects of what we're going to talk about is considered a weakness in the patriarchy. And the problem is, and it's in all of us. It's within every single one of us, that even within, well, don't feel your emotions, just stand strong, right? And the challenge is the masculine and feminine do not exist in separation. It's like picturing a yin-yang symbol, and one is not there. This half can be neither masculine nor feminine because it's not in harmony with anything. And this is what's happened in our world. We've defined masculine and feminine as something we are, right? Oh, well, I'm a really feminine person, or that's a very masculine person. It's like, no, there's no such thing. That's like saying, well, CrossFit is masculine and yoga is feminine, or even building decks is masculine and taking care of children if it's feminine or something. It's not like that. It's not gender-based. It's not anything like that. If you imagine that every one of us is whole, every one of us has masculine and feminine energy. This is duality, right? There is the singularity of God, consciousness, oneness, the unified field, however you understand it. And then we exist in this time-space continuum in duality, that we interact with each other. Masculine and feminine are two different energies as to how we interact with each other, how we join. It's not some definition of the masculine is big and burly and the feminine is, demure and sensuous. It's not like those have nothing to do with connection. Masculine and feminine are two complementary energies that work together to create connection. So, for example, one way that's really intimate for us to really make us feel alive as people, there's one of the biggest dynamics is the giving and receiving. And this lends itself into so many different aspects of our life. It's talking and listening, and it's all these things. If you imagine, well, even let's imagine that one. If we're having a conversation, in order for us to actually have connection, we must polarize. One must be talking and one must be listening. Neither is a more dominant role or a more important role, or, and yet, in our society, we have to be able to do public speaking, but we don't get graded on our ability to listen. Right? So if we're having a conversation and we're both talking, like we both have the energy of talking, right? This is what's happening. There's no joining. I'm talking, you're talking, I'm talking, you're talking. No one's listening. Just talk, 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 talk. No connection. Pure separation. Right? Whereas if I say, hey, I have a question, and this person goes, okay, and they share, and I listen, there's a connection, right? It's really that simple in many ways. But what if both people, nobody wants to talk, and everyone's just sort of waiting? We're still in separation. Two feminines are separate. Two masculines are separate. Only masculine and feminine work together, right? So a lot of these dynamics are sort of shades of that. And one of the shades of that, which is very, very personal, it's not so much about relationships at all, is The idea of having inspiration, which is receiving, listening, right? The feminine is inspiration, and manifesting, which is the masculine, which is creating, which is doing something on the planet. This is receiving, doing. These aren't different aspects of each other, right? It's not CrossFit and yoga. Those are just two different things. Receiving and manifesting are two entirely different energies, but they work together. They dance together, right? You have an idea and you think, yes, I'm going to do that. You go out and do it and you go, oh, that's not quite working. Hold on a minute. And then you wait and new inspiration comes. This is the creative process. And when we are in this process, and I'm just going to take it to its nth degree just for a moment, it can be orgasmic, right? Like if you speak to artists who actually create from their soul, right? They listen and they get in that zone and they are simply putting out exactly what they feel. They are in a timeless, orgasmic bliss state. This is that coming together of the duality, coming together of the masculine and feminine. And when it comes together, we join together in perfect merging and feel bliss. This is why this is so important to learn, because we can feel that right within us. Right? We can simply find this bliss by listening within and taking action in life. There is a joy in this, and it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about art. It doesn't have to be like that. But it can be about anything. But as long as we're doing what we hear, we're happy. That could be, all I want to do is sit with a cup of tea and read a book. That's my inspiration. I go and I have a cup of tea and a book, and I'm blissful. Like it's really that simple. But what if I hear this and my brain says, no, there's these 5 things you have to do first. Now we're in disconnect, right? We are no longer connected within ourselves. Our world is not the same as our inner world. So we are now in disconnection with ourselves. So even if we convince ourselves to do the 5 things first, there's no bliss there. There's no happiness. There's probably even sadness and resentment, right? So this disconnect inside of us is so important. Like if we have a disconnect within us, we will have a disconnect with everyone else, right? It's just natural. For example, another beautiful dynamic is the protector and the vulnerable. So if you imagine the way this works, and this is very situational, like this is not gendered at all. So imagine you're sitting on a bus and you are in your wholeness, right? You are in your full masculine, feminine wholeness, relatively separate from the rest of the people on the bus, right? You're just not interacting. And all of a sudden there's this little old woman at the front of the bus, and someone gets on the bus and tries to steal her purse. And she's like wrestling and wrestling. You are watching. So something is starting a connection between you, and you're watching. And you realize that in this connection, she is vulnerable and she cannot defend herself. So in this connection, you rise into protector. You go over, you defend whatever you do, what you have to do. You get her purse back. Maybe the person gets kicked off the bus. She says, thank you. And then you both retreat back into your wholeness. You don't maintain the protector and walk around all like all day. It's not necessary anymore. It was only necessary in that moment. And that protector to the vulnerable, again, can be anybody. It can be someone you just see on the street who falls down. You go, whoa, here, and they catch them. And now you have a connection. Like on some level, this masculine feminine connection is very, very simple. It's something we all intuitively know. We know that that's how we connect with each other. You know, it's when we're there for people when they need us, or, you know, when someone's a really great listener and you really need to talk, or when someone really has great answers and you really need to listen, or whatever. There's a connection. There's a bond there. And the protector and the vulnerable is really important to imagine within, right? Because sometimes we often ask ourselves, like, how do I become safe? How do I feel safe? How am I vulnerable in relationships? How do I do that, right? Well, first of all, we have to be able to be vulnerable with ourselves. We have to actually be able to be honest with where we're really at. You know, we can't put on, if we're putting up facades for ourselves, and even we can't admit that we're unhappy or broken or hurting or grieving or whatever, disappointed, alone, then we can't share it with anyone else either. So it's interesting that often when we want to strengthen our ability to be vulnerable, which is really important because this is foundational for actually being able to connect with another human, we actually have to have a very strong masculine within. We have to have a strong protector within, that if we're vulnerable with ourselves, I'm not going to, my personal masculine at one point was really mean to my vulnerable self, right? If I was vulnerable and I was like, I really don't want to do that, you know, that other side, it's kind of like these masculine and feminine dynamics exist in separation and in union, right? In union, they create harmony and love and connection and bliss. In separation, this is when the vulnerable one says, but here's my story. And it's like, oh, for God's sake, what are you being so ridiculous about? Why don't you just put your big girl panties on and just sort it out? Like, the dynamic exists still. It's just horrible, right? Like, we still interact. It's just awful. Well, what if this is your inner protector and vulnerable, right? If your inner protector doesn't actually protect you and doesn't honor the depth of vulnerability you're sharing, right? If I actually say to myself, I really don't want to do that, my inner protector has to say, I'm so glad you told me. All right, that's really important. Honoring that inner wisdom, honoring that deep feminine truth, that must be part of our journey. All right, you know what? I got the door. No one's coming in. You know, you're safe, right? And then your protector rises because it respects the vulnerability. It respects how important that is. It's the same in intimacy, in relationships, where if a person is actually willing to be vulnerable, I once had a boyfriend who, it was sort of, I think I told you guys this story maybe in a previous talk, and we didn't get to see each other very often. So anytime we ever did get together, I really wanted to make love. I didn't want to spend time on whatever I was upset about at the time or chewing about in my life. Nothing to do with him, just in my own world. And I remember one time he was coming over for a visit and I was just, oh, my head was just back and forth, back and forth. It's like my inner protector's like, for God's sake, you know, you only get to see him for a couple hours. Like, just put all those tears away. Like, what are you doing? Like, just so mean, like so disconnected and mean. And then I didn't know what to do because I wasn't getting any support from inside. And so I didn't know what to do. So he got there and he was like, how's it going? And I'm like, He says, well, let's just go lay down, right? And I'm still like, should I, shouldn't I, you know, and this guy's fighting at me and whatever. And then finally we're lying there and he says, are you okay? And I had to make a choice whether I was going to go vulnerable and be honest or keep a facade up and be fake. And I decided to be honest. And I just started crying and stuff. And he just put his arms around me and just held me and just sort of stroked my hair and just was like, oh my God, like, yeah, just keep talking. Like, get this out. You know, this is important. And of course, that made me cry more. And we just ended up in this whole thing. And in the end, once all the tears were gone, we laid in the most beautiful union. Like, it was the same bliss that we would have been if we had had intercourse or something. It was the same connection. And he said to me, I looked at him at one point, and he was crying a little. And I said, "What?" And he said, "I can't believe you trusted me like that. I can't believe you were comfortable enough with me to be so open." And that's where we want to be inside, right? That we are safe enough for our inner child, for our vulnerable self, for our truth to be really honored, to be really trusted that if I'm feeling this, this is important, right? And to be heard is such a big deal, right? So now you imagine if we don't have a strong, protector, vulnerable inside, right? If they're like this, you can imagine how easily that extends into our relationships, right? If the other person's being vulnerable, we might be like, "Oh, come on, for God's sake," or whatever. Sometimes we're nicer to other people than we are to ourselves. But we definitely wouldn't necessarily be vulnerable, because what if they criticize us? What if they don't just give us an arm? What if they try to talk us out of it? What if they try to convince us that our feelings, we're just making mountains out of molehills? Right? So this is why it's so important to have this strong connection within. And it's a connection. It's not just, I have a strong protector and I'm excellent at being vulnerable. They have to be connected. That not only the protector honors the vulnerable trusts the protector. And that's a huge deal. Because if my vulnerable doesn't trust my protector, I won't be vulnerable. Right? It's funny. So if you've read my book, I talk about the time that I went celibate. And I've talked about this a little bit here, but there was a time a few years ago that I decided to go celibate for, quite a few reasons. And what was interesting actually is one of the reasons was I was severely anemic. And I had this vision that I actually was always pouring my energy out to whoever to whatever man I was with. And at some point during my celibacy, it actually felt like my pelvic bowl that had been tipped forward my whole life. And then as soon as I sort of stopped focusing on having a partner or something, my pelvic bowl energetically tipped upwards, and all the energy within me was flowing into me and then recirculating within me instead of into this other person, right? It was actually flowing within me. And the hilarious part of that is that I actually felt guilty about it. It's like, well, I can't just keep all this nourishing energy for myself. Like, what would I do with it if I'm not pouring it into someone else? So that was quite a thing to actually allow this energy to flow within me. But what was really interesting about that time, was I actually realized that I actually imagined that I had an inner masculine and feminine within me. And I actually wanted to become my own best boyfriend. I actually wanted to, because I realized I had a disconnect. I was sort of, let's put it this way, I was looking out into the world as a newly single woman and thinking that the men were just broken. Nothing against any men that are here or any men in general, because what was really interesting is it had nothing to do with the men. It was me. That was my mirror. It was my masculine. It was my masculine that wasn't showing up. It was my masculine who wasn't actually protecting me and doing this instead. It was my masculine. It had nothing to do with anyone else, right? And so I actually had to learn what that meant. So if in the land of giving and receiving, right? Would I even let my inner boyfriend give to me? and just receive it openly? Would I let my inner boyfriend take me out to that restaurant I really want to go to? Or, oh, is it just too expensive and I can't receive that and I'm not worth it? And like, I had quite an experience in my relationship with my inner boyfriend. And even the vulnerable and the protector. You know, I often thought, well, what would I want my boyfriend to do if I was having a bad day? And it was always, he'd walk in the door and he'd say, you've had a really hard day, Katrina. You know what? You go and get in the bathtub. I'm going to take your cell phone. We're going to light some candles and you're going to take care of you because it matters. I'll field any calls and I'll be at the door, but you just take as long as you want. My inner masculine wouldn't have done that before because there's those 5 things we have to do, right? Okay, there's so many aspects of this. Another beautiful one is the balance between structure and chaos, which again has shadows, or it's similar to the whole protector and vulnerable. But structure and chaos is really interesting because sometimes we love the feminine or we love the masculine, right? So let's say we only like structure. I only want structure. I want to be stoic. I want to always be dependable. I always want this, right? So what happens? Because we're disconnected from our own inner chaos, because it exists in every single one of us. It's not like some of us are more structured or more chaotic. That's not it. The yin-yang symbol is perfect balance. It's not that some people thrive with excess yang and a tiny little bit of yin. We all thrive when it's balanced. So if we really love structure, no matter what, it's really important to look at why we aren't connected to our chaos. Why aren't we connected to the part of us that doesn't make sense? Our emotions are pure chaos. And they're chaos because you can't control them. There's no structure for them. They just are what they are. We're either happy or sad, and you cannot control it, no matter how many pros and cons list we make as to what the answer should be. Our emotions tell us the truth all the time. And sometimes they're conflicting. Sometimes we live in incredible paradoxes where we desperately want this, but we also desperately want this, and we're all, it's even in relationships. Sometimes we desperately want the security of having a relationship, but we really want the passion also. And what do you do if those don't exist together, and how do you get there? And I have great faith that if both people want it, you'll find a way and it'll be a really fun adventure. But emotions are hard. Emotions get overwhelming, right? So to really honor the chaos. And like yesterday we did a talk about living in flux and chaos, and understanding that maybe everything we're made of is actually chaos and flux. But what's beautiful about structure and chaos, especially within our world here on Insight Time, or within our family, why do we meditate? Right? There's lots of good reasons to meditate. But meditation is actually, in many ways, a very masculine, it strengthens our masculine. It strengthens our masculine because it creates stillness, right? Why do we sit tall, right? Why do we sit with an erect spine? Why do we tuck our chin in? This is called Jalandhar, right? Neck lock. Why do we tuck our neck in to create this locked position? Why do they have their legs in full lotus, if you can do full lotus? Why do you do that? Because it creates stillness. And now you become this perfectly still being, right? You have this beautiful triangular base, this beautiful vertical, and you are absolutely still. This is the thrill of masculine structure, masculine stillness. And when we can really hone that, when we can really hone that stillness and do not move, like really practice it, we can listen. This is where the feminine pours into us. It pours into that stillness and we come into bliss. But we have, and again, this is the joy of polarizing, right? This is the joy of experiencing pure stillness so that we can listen completely. If we're kind of sort of still, like you know that, right? If you're meditating and you're not really comfortable and you're sort of fidgeting, every time you fidget, the connection's lost, right? So it's really important to find a position where you are perfectly still and comfortable. And in that, it's like the total polarity into the masculine stillness. Anything is possible within it. It's almost like your deepest soul knows, whoa, she's serious. She's 100% showing up for this. Okay, I'll go deep. I'll look a little bit further inside as to what's going on, right? But if I'm really not that serious about it, I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever. I have an itch. Our feminine's like, today's not a good day. We'll just keep everything buried today. Right? So the both are perfect. And this is what's really important. There's no masculine's not better than feminine, feminine's not better than masculine. You know, if people said to me, do you think that we should have a matriarchy? I'm like, no. I think we should have balance and harmony. I think the masculine and feminine are designed to work together. It's beautiful that way, right? It's interesting too, right? The real joy of the polarity. I've worked with couples in the past where they often got together in the beginning because one had that, in relationship, they had that masculine structure in spades, right? When they were in relationship, they tended to always create structure, right? And the other in relationship naturally was more spontaneous and more chaotic and more flowing with it, right? Again, on their own, it's really important for them to be both, which isn't often true because that's why we seek it in another, to kind of balance our own stuff, and then you end up with codependency and all kinds of dangerous things. So it's much better to actually cultivate it within ourselves, because then we get to enjoy it in the other person. So for example, what happened with these guys, well, a number of these couples, because say the man, it was gendered in this way, the man was very, very only masculine. There was no chaos, there was no unknown, there was no intuition, only masculine, right? She was only chaos, only intuition, only spontaneity, only that. So what did they do? In the beginning, it's kind of exciting, right? Because you've got this polarization. But as life went on, they tried to make each other like the other one because they couldn't relate. You know, the spontaneous one couldn't relate to the structure. So she didn't like it and she felt distant. And the stoic one was just driven crazy by all the chaos. So, well, the truth is she got medication, right? It's a sad story, actually. But so eventually they kind of ended up in this sort of neutral gray nothing zone with no polarity, no nothing, right? So now imagine each one of us finds this beautiful balance within us. We are all equally balanced, masculine, feminine. I love my structure, I love my order, and I love having a million colors. How do I color it in, color around it, have new creations for new structure to build, whatever, right? I'm completely balanced. And then I meet someone and they also are completely balanced. They are fully connected, and that's the key word. They're connected to both, right? So all of a sudden we come together. So we can choose to stay separate in our beautiful infinite wholeness, right? We're awesome. Or we can say, hey, you want to join together and make something bigger, right? You want to make a bigger yin-yang symbol? We're both awesome yin-yang symbols, but what if we made something bigger, polarized, and joined together and did something even more epic? Well, then I say to myself, That'd be awesome. And he says, let's say he prefers to be in the feminine, and let's say he prefers to be in the masculine. And I go, all right, you know what? Here's all my masculine, because I'm good with it, but why don't you take it? And he goes, okay, awesome. Here's all my feminine. And we create this great big yin yang polarity, and we experience something we couldn't experience by ourselves, right? No codependence, no nothing. When the experience is over, or we go to work, or we do whatever, we go, whew, thank you very much. That was fantastic. We pull ourselves back into our wholeness, and we go out into the world and experience our life. It's awesome, right? The other person doesn't have to change. The other person doesn't have to be anything. They don't have to be masculine, feminine. They don't have to be anything, because we're all whole. We're all happy, right? There's a lot of ones that are a bit more, not so much about relationships, but for example, even the experience of doing and being, right? These are very different. Again, you can feel like there's sort of shades of the others, right? This whole idea of actually sitting and being. It's so interesting. It's like, there's that saying that you should meditate for 10 minutes a day. Unless you don't have time, then you should meditate for an hour. I love and hate that comment so much. But it's so true, right? It's in those times that we are so manically busy. It is when we must spend time just being. It's weird how we have this idea that I was going to say, sometimes we can stretch the timeline, right? Let's say you have, like, for me, for example, if I get into a project, I'll just dive into it, and there'll just be papers all over my room, and I'll just be like diving into it, and I'm not going to be spending too much time being, because I am in full manifestation, right? But then it's really important that whatever my yin yang symbol is, that if I'm in full doing for maybe a week or 2 weeks, what am I going to do to balance that for 2 weeks? Right? That's the key. You don't have to be equally doing and being in a single day, but at some point, it needs to balance out. The longer you're in this perpetual doing, the longer you're going to have to be in perpetual being, right? And again, it's such an issue with the way we've understood the masculine and feminine, that the feminine wasn't important, that the yin wasn't important, the being wasn't important. We literally, through the filter of only the masculine matters, you're not doing anything. You're either doing something or you're not doing something, right? You're doing something, or it's the absence of the valuable doing of something. But it's not like that. Being isn't just not doing something. It's literally experiencing being alive. Without that, we lose all meaning in what we're doing. Like, it's not a flaky thing. It's really, really important. And doing and being. And I'll just quickly mention a couple others, and then I'm going to just read your comments. Like even the ideas of logic and intuition. And again, you can feel how this sort of feels like the others. But we so often prefer one over the other, or we value one over the other. Perhaps we only value intuition, right? And we leave logic for the bankers or something. But this isn't healthy either, right? It's really valuable to actually know that, no, I actually can create structure. I can actually be logical. I can actually do that. And when I can do that, it actually gives places for the intuition to land. It gives places for that. Then my intuition can actually create something, right? It's again, like I love talking about Einstein. because he had such an incredible mathematical mind. And again, the way math and science is taught in school doesn't necessarily lend itself to everybody's way of thinking. So I have friends who, like I have one friend who I consider to be absolutely brilliant, and she counts on her fingers, and she jokes about it. She's like in her 60s, and she's like, well, you know me, I count my fingers and you're the mathematician. But recently, we've been doing a lot of work together, and she's like, wow, I actually can do math. I'm smarter than I thought. And this whole thing, because she couldn't do the math that we were taught in school, or the way they were taught in school, she assumed she had no left brain, right? She didn't have that system type brain. But eventually now she's like, I do actually. And it's created this sort of security within herself that says, yeah, no, I'm not just a right-brained intuitive. I've got it all. Because we all have it all. There might be one side that we're more comfortable in, or that flow freer, but we all have it all, and it's really valuable to honor both. Because again, it's funny, right? As much as we can kind of diss the masculine for oppressing the feminine or whatever, it's really the system that made it happen, but it goes the other way too. Like sometimes we really criticize the feminine, we criticize the masculine, and we don't trust each other. And I mean within, right? My masculine doesn't trust my feminine doesn't trust my masculine. And really it's just a lack of connection. It's a lack of honor. And you just have to start small, right? Like, this is a really silly example, but I decided I'm really bad personally because I know you want to know this about me. I can so get focused on what I'm doing in my life and whatever I'm doing for work or with people or whatever. I can forget that I have a body. Like I literally can just forget that I should take care of this. You talk about the feminine aspect of me, like as opposed to the energy masculine, right? I can forget that this body needs some loving care sometimes. And, so there's these vitamins, like just vitamins that I want to take and different things I want to do. So I made a list of all the things I'm going to do this week, every day. These 7 things, whatever, whether it's taking that vitamin or doing 4 push-ups or whatever I'm going to do today. And it was so funny because one of the things I just don't want to do. Like I just don't want to. I don't know where the idea came from to even put it on the list. And every day I go, I don't want to do that. And I was laughing about it this morning as I was thinking about doing this talk, and I realized this is my feminine wisdom going, Katrina, this is not part of your world. Take it off the list. What? And then my masculine, what? We made a deal. And it's like, well, we can be dynamic, right? But it's important for me to know that I'm going to listen to me, right? The other interesting thing before I read the comments is that the other interesting dynamic, and again, I could talk about masculine and feminine for a long time, so you have no idea how I'm trying to bring it into an hour. But one masculine and feminine dynamic, which is interesting within us, is the masculine is the known. It's kind of the energy of the sun, and the feminine is what is unknown. Sometimes the energy of the moon. Or even, we used to plant according to the moon cycles. We were organic farmers, and that everything during a growing moon would actually above the earth would grow. And in a dying moon, everything below the earth would grow. And that's a very interesting thing in our world, because again, we've really been taught that only that which can be known is valuable. And we don't value what is unknown. We don't value the mystery. We don't value intuition, what we feel inside. And if you can't articulate it, it's not real. And it's very, very important to honor what cannot be spoken, what cannot be shared, as equally important, like as the unseen roots of the plant. And when we honor that within ourselves, again, all of these things blend together, right? We honor our intuition, we honor the chaos, we honor the things we don't understand. And from that, it's like almost all of those feminine aspects, those, like you can feel how different the feminine aspects are from the masculine, but how amazingly blissful life can be when they dance together, right? And how big we become, like literally how expansive we become. Like sometimes we really do have to expand. We have to expand bigger than we were before because maybe we were just a sort of a half of a yin-yang symbol. So we have to expand. We're very expandable. And when we expand, suddenly I go, really? So I'm going to listen to all the inner thoughts, and I'm going to listen to my gut instinct. I'm going to listen to my intuition. I'm going to listen to my crazy feelings and really listen and care. Then I'm going to look out into the world and I'm going to go, all right, here's what we're going to do. This is very alive, right? And every single aspect of who we are matters then. And then even if we go into relationships, we kind of expect the same kind of communication with our relationships as we have within us. The same respect, the same connection, the same joy of polarity, right? We're not intimidated by someone who comes out masculine and wanting to lead and doing all this because I'm like, yeah, right on. I got it inside me too. I'm happy to let you take a turn. Or if someone's really diving into the feminine, you're like, yep, I got it. I know what this feels like. Give her. You know, I've got a shoulder for you, right? If we have both within ourselves, can we do the dance with another who has the same? Not being just one energy, but being able to go back and forth with another whose energy is balanced. So, most of the time, the masculine and feminine is very situational. There's no preference. There's no, so for example, in the structure and chaos or even giving and receiving, things like that in life, it's not that one person is always in this. It's not like that. It's very situational. We respond to whatever the situation is. In relationship, in intimate relationships, if we want a dynamic relationship, if we really want to have this increased magnetism between you, right? Like sometimes we just want a relationship where we are whole and we enjoy each other's company like soul friends. And we trust each other and it's wonderful, and maybe sometimes we make love, but there's not that magnetism that creates a new whole, right? It's not like that. If you want to create a new whole, if you want to have a different experience, then we need to polarize. And you can go back and forth, right? But not within the same experience. If you're having an experience, as soon as you shift gears, you kind of go to zero and then you start again, right? And oftentimes in relationships, we want to go back and forth because we don't understand that giving and receiving, it's not about being even Steven, right? It's not about, okay, well, I've given this much, so now they have to give me this much, or they've given me, oh, I better give back. The act of giving has to simply be done out of the joy of giving, right? And the act of receiving is done out of the joy of receiving. And when that act is complete, it's complete. There's no keeping score. If you're giving because you're keeping score, this is not union. You are giving so that you can keep score. Giving and receiving in union means that person needs something and you give it to them because you have it. They don't have to give you something to return it. The union is complete. So when we interact with someone this way, sometimes we want to go back and forth because we're so accustomed to things being given with strings attached that we now owe them. again, because the giving has always been the most valued part, it's like, oh, like literally, like, oh, really? So you're just going to lie there and just take? So now, here's the other piece, because someone mentioned narcissists and things like that, people like that, is that there's a great book, I think I mentioned it in another talk, called Give and Take. I think it's by Adam Grant or something like that. And if we've been surrounded by takers, so they talk about how there's natural givers and natural takers. And takers aren't receiving. This isn't this. Taking is also masculine. You give, they take. And they take and take and take and take and take. And then what happens is eventually the giver becomes a matcher. And they only give as much as the taker gives, which inevitably becomes nothing and the relationship ends. But it's really painful. It's a painful journey to that point. So my recommendation is, first, yep, you can go back and forth. But I would seriously look into, or I would have that inner journey to ask, am I comfortable fully polarizing? Like, because in relationship, I teach courses about this, and I often ask people on a continuum in a relationship, where do you like to be? Because it's not 100%, right? Do you prefer to be like 70% masculine, 30% feminine in relationship, not in yourself? We have to be whole and balanced 50-50 in our own self. That's us. But as soon as I choose to join with another, what do I prefer there in terms of dynamics? Do I prefer like a 90-10 split? Do I prefer a 80-20, 60-40, 50-50? Like whatever, right? For me, I probably like an 80-20, where I'm like in the feminine 80% and masculine 20%. So sure, there's times that I'm like, hey, go lay on the bed, I'm going to give you a massage. It's not like 100%. But the most important thing about that is that there is a polarity, not in everybody, and it's really important. Like, not everybody desires this kind of union, and that's perfect, right? Every single one of us is on a soul's journey, and not just because I love polarizing. I love the feel of it. I love the magnetism. I love how alive it makes me feel. I love how it creates like almost an eternal bond with another person, like just feeling that natural magnetism with another person and surrendering into it. Like, I love it, which is why I teach it. But it is not for everybody. And it doesn't, so if you're with someone who doesn't like polarizing, they're not wrong. They just don't want to. And it's all good, right? But in relationship, if you do love that, if you love that sort of dance of the masculine and feminine, there will be a polarity regardless of gender, non-gender, orientation, everything that your soul wants to explore. So for me, because I love the feminine, I love exploring vulnerability. I love exploring surrender. There is something within me that when I can just release the guards, drop everything, and completely surrender, I become huge. I just become so expansive. It's like I become the universe. I become something else. And it's just incredible. And when I trust the other person like this, like I remember this is one lovely man, and he used to walk into my condo and he used to look at me, and he would actually say, "Oh, my goddess." And he would kind of do this bowing thing, and it was almost like this surrender to the feminine idea. And I would just melt. I would just go, oh, all my guards would drop. I would literally become purely vulnerable. And when he saw that, he would literally go, like he just became energetically this powerhouse of a masculine. And that became it was a beautiful dynamic that we got to play in this beautiful, surrendered vulnerability and this powerful, responsible masculine. And the more I trusted, the more and it was just, and the more powerful he was, or the more connected he was, the more I would surrender, right? So I really love the polarity, but it's a challenge in the world where we don't know how to be connected, and we don't know how to read each other. So it's sometimes hard to trust the masculine, and it's hard to trust the feminine because they're not connected either. How can we receive without giving up our power to another? So this is exactly what it has been like for the last millennia. That if we just go into that vulnerable state, we are giving up our power. The other person literally has power over us. And depending on what country we live in, and even here in Canada, this has been our very, very, very recent history, like within my lifetime. And so this is a very different concept that as women and as men, like, realize this masculine feminine dynamic, this power over in separation, can also be parental, right? That parental overpowering, and the child is in the feminine, right? So regardless of gender, many of us have felt that giving up of power because someone else has taken the power in a disconnected way, right? So this isn't just women. And I think for me, first of all, I don't allow myself to go into I don't go into how deeply we go into the masculine and feminine. Polarity, Cynthia, just is, if you imagine magnets, there's a positive and negative pole, and they have opposite energy which attracts each other, right? And this is sort of, we're all made of magnetism, and we all are literally attracted and repulsed by each other. And so this is polarity. Sometimes we want to impose an idea like this, like the vulnerable and the strong, on a relationship from the outside in. So I want to be able to be vulnerable, even if that's not the nature of the relationship, right? This polarity is only possible when it's safe, when there is connection, right? If there's no connection, then it's giving up power, right? But so it's like, it is a function of the relationship. If the relationship is connected and loving and honoring, just like I was talking about, sort of that listening and connected, you will feel naturally safe to be vulnerable, right? Like, I would never tell someone to practice vulnerability with someone who's not paying attention. It's not about, it's like, I think in the last talk I talked about leading and following. Like, a good leader simply reads the feminine, reads their feminine partner, reads the follower. If they're dancing with someone who is a cha-cha dancer for 30 years and, is amazing and has all these skills, they are going to read that, and they're going to lead the dance in that way. If they're going to dance with their granny, they're going to shorten their step because they want union. The goal is always union. But if that leader has simply decided that here's how they're going to lead, and they're just going to whip you around, regardless of who you are or what you love or what you like to do or your abilities, they might be leading, but they're really just controlling you. Well, the person following is probably going to go, okay, this is no fun. I don't know what you're doing, so I'm not going to dance with you anymore. It's the same thing. It's a function of the connection. And when the connection is strong, there is no giving up power, right? It's all, everybody owns all the power. Everyone has choice. So if I choose to be in a vulnerable state, I choose it because I trust this other person. And at any moment, I can withdraw it. So the second it doesn't feel okay, things are changing, right? There's no power struggle at all. It's a very intentional thing. Can you speak to what it is to have that balance within and not to choose a partner, not choose to partner? Totally. Choosing to partner is such a choice. And again, I feel like, just in answer to Helen's question, historically, partnering was almost survival, right? Because the genders weren't balanced and women didn't have rights and, and so partnering was the only thing you could do to even survive, right? But today we have choice. And we can actually literally sit in this beautiful unity and beautiful happiness and just enjoy life. It's not necessary at all. And if we do partner, it doesn't have to be for life. It doesn't have to be for anything. And I really feel like we're sort of at the front end of moving into a place where we really are redefining that. We're redefining it in all aspects. That really anything's possible. It doesn't, like, even, again, even whether it's orientation or gender or all these things, it's like, no, we just get to be us. We just get to be exactly who we are. And if in this moment I am in beautiful harmony and I'm just enjoying life, awesome. And if someone comes along and two worlds collide and we go, hey, there's something to explore here. Let's explore that. Awesome. And we explore it for a while. And maybe a while is a week or a year or 10 years. Who knows? But as long as it's interesting, then we go, thank you for this. This was wonderful. Back in my harmony, right? Like, who knows what it's going to be? So none of this is assuming partnering is an ideal thing or a lifelong goal or what we need to be happy. Is insight necessary for polarity to happen? All right, I'll answer that and then I'll go back over it later and I think so. I think insight is, if we even substituted the word awareness or consciousness, it's kind of like, imagine that this is what it is to be human. The idea of blindly doing anything, it's almost like you sort of get to a point in your life where it's not possible anymore, right? You can't just close a blind eye and just jump in and, it's not necessary. We can't do that. But I think to enjoy insight, enjoy consciousness, and to really be able, because even the last few men I've had long relationships with, we actually had to really talk about this. This was a really big deal, this masculine feminine idea, because it's not known, right? It needs redefinition if we want it for union, because the old definitions have nothing to do with connection. And in my opinion, we really desire connection. And so, for example, even to the question of, what if when I'm totally whole, there's this lovely, lovely man, and he, I think we'd met on some online dating app, and he would text me, but he wasn't really carrying the conversation. He was just kind of like, oh, well, I'm kind of tired, not really having a great day. And I was like, I didn't even know him, right? We were just texting before we even met. And I thought, And I'm just watching because I know very well that I really want someone who loves to play in the masculine. They don't have to be anything. I just want them to, I love to play in the feminine, so I don't want anyone to be anything they're not. So I just sort of, I would message back, but I wouldn't really make any more effort. And then we went out on a date, and it was really lovely. And then again, he didn't really pursue much. He didn't really do much with all that. And after about 2 weeks, he messaged me. He goes, "What's wrong? Like, do you not like me?" And I said, "Oh no, I think you're lovely." I said, I'm really only interested in being in the feminine. And so you don't have to be something you're not, but, I'm not going to pursue you. If I have to pursue you while we're dating, doesn't say, it tells me a lot what our relationship's going to be like. And not critically, just it tells me a lot what our relationship's going to be like. I don't want that. And anyway, so eventually he says, okay, well, I'm going to take you out for Thai food or something. So we go out and we sat there, and I told him this, and again, not in these words, I'm sure I found better words than this, but I basically said, like, I am whole. Like, I'm happy. I love my life. I am great. I'm awesome. And he said, so you don't really need me? Like, you don't need me for anything? And I said, no, of course I don't need you. I really want to spend time with you. I think you're fantastic. I'm attracted to you. My whole being looks forward to seeing you again. And I choose to be with you. I said, but I only want to do it in this fun masculine polarity play. That's my fun, So we actually had to have a conversation. He just went, well, what exactly do you mean by that? And we just had this conversation. And he just sort of thought, all right. Right? And he loved that masculine. And he was kind of naturally kind of shy, but he really loved having that, oh, so that's the structure? Okay, I got it. And then he'd call me out on it. Like if I actually started, like even in lovemaking, if I started, sort of taking control, he'd be like, hey, I thought you wanted me to be masculine. I totally got my comeuppance. But so in this time, like we're shifting. So it takes time. We have to be able to talk about it. And maybe that's why we started today with telling jokes. That we really need to be light about it and know that nobody knows how to do this, right? It's new. We probably didn't learn it from our parents or our grandparents. We certainly don't see it in movies. So it's kind of a new thing, and it's good to be a little light about it and kind of go, yeah, I heard this crazy chick talk about masculine and feminine, and I kind of want to play with it. What do you think? I don't know. We all get to kind of just explore it and have fun. I hope you have a wonderful day or a wonderful evening wherever you are. And we'll see you soon.